supply catchments around Melbourne. We treat and supply the drinking water to Melbourne from those catchments. We also treat and supply recycled water to customers. We remove and treat most of Melbourne's sewerage we also manage all of Melbourne's major waterways and drainage systems in our region. And in terms of our sewerage treatment process and plants, we have two main ones, one in the east called the Eastern Treatment Plant, and the one you're going to learn about and see directly today, the Western Treatment Plant, which really treats all of the sewerage coming from the western and northern parts of the Melbourne area. So that's a very broad overview of who Melbourne Water is and what we do. I think now we're ready to launch into the tour. So I will hand you over to our Education Officer, Kim O'Hoy, and Kim will guide us through the Western Plant virtual tour. So over to you, Kim.
So hello everybody, my name's Kim and thank you so much for inviting me to talk about our Western Treatment Plant virtual tour. Before I share my screen, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. Our virtual tour, the Western Treatment Plant virtual tour, is on the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung people. I would like to pay my respects to Wadawurrung elders, past and present, and the elders and people from other communities who may be here today. So we're going to start. We're going to have a look at the Western Treatment Plant tour, and I'm just sharing my screen now. We'll send you a link a little bit later. Some of you may already have a link to the Western Treatment Plant virtual tour. But if you don't, I will try and do something that I've been practicing and put up a QR code at the end of this tour. So I'm just kind of gently becoming more and more technically adept, but it doesn't always work. And as everybody said right from the start, if you have any questions, please put your hand up. I'm not able to keep an eye on the chat, so I'm hoping that Robbie or Paul or Hui will be able to actually just say, Kim, can you stop for a second? We've got a great question here. So first of all, you may actually see, I'm hoping you can see the very first page of the Western Treatment Plant virtual tour. And this is referred to as our home page. You can actually see some quite beautiful, we like to think it's beautiful. And I would say that it is a sewage treatment plant and it can be beautiful. So some of you out there might actually feel the same way as I do. So this is our very first view. What it shows you are a number of very large lagoons. So here, if you can follow my cursor, you will be able to see a number of very large lagoons that we use to treat 52% of Melbourne's sewage. So just over half of Melbourne's sewage travels to the Western Treatment Plant. What I'd first like to do is to explain this home page to you. So it's a little bit about the actual virtual tour without getting into the treatment process. So as I said, this is our home page. I don't want to get you too dizzy, but what you can do is you click onto your mouse and you can spin and go all the way around. So what you can actually see here is the Western Treatment Plant. Its shoreline is on Port Phillip Bay. So if we have an additional or excess sewage that has been treated or effluent, then it can be discharged into Port Phillip Bay. And that is quite an important and historical way that we've actually treated the sewage at the Western Treatment Plant. Let me just say that the Western Treatment Plant that you're viewing right now is Melbourne's very first sewage treatment plant. And it was first opened for business in 1896. 1997. So we like to think that that's quite a number of years old. But of course, there have been upgrades along the way. So like I said, we're going to go back and we're going to talk a little bit about what is on this home page. For those who are beginners, who don't know anything at all about a sewage treatment plant, in particular the Western treatment plant, we have a little video. I'm not going to play everything because we're a little bit short of time. So if I played and showed you everything in depth, then I'd probably go over my 30 minutes. But you can see at the bottom of the screen, it says start video. And this is a great introduction into what our visitors, in particular our school visitors, will actually be viewing if they use this virtual tour. We also have on the left-hand side of the home page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what that represents is different parts of the sewage process. So I'll go through those in more detail, but in the first instance, for example, let's say somebody has already opened up the sewage, this virtual tour, and has decided they've already seen the first 2 stages of the sewage process, and they don't want to see them again. They can jump straight away into the third part, which you can actually, when you hover over the number 3, you'll see it's about secondary treatment. So we've talked about the video at the bottom, which is a great introduction into what each of these sections will be talking about. And you also have an ability on the left-hand side of the screen here is to move between the different sewage processes. At the bottom of the screen is something that I think is really important because it puts things in perspective. I'm just going to click on this first one, and you can see at the bottom right-hand corner, it says map. So I love to show this one because it's a really great graphic of what we're going to be talking about or you're going to be listening and hopefully asking me questions about. But it actually gives people a little bit of a sense of moving, sequentially, one step at a time. So I'm just going to pull it down a little bit, and I'm just going to show you a little bit about the sewage treatment plant at the Western treatment plant. So here it actually says it's 30 kilometres away from Melbourne. So the sewage, 52% of Melbourne's sewage travels by gravity all the way to the Western treatment plant. So it's around 30, 35 kilometres where it travels deep below the ground, and it travels in pipes as big as about 4 metres in diameter. So our large sewer pipes, our largest sewer pipes, are about 4 metres in diameter. So how much sewage is actually coming into the Western treatment plant every day? We're looking at about 500 million litres per day, and that comes from about 52% of Melbourne's sewage. So what we like to do is we like to equate that into something most people will understand a little bit better. And if I said 500 million litres, many of you, because you're in the trade, you will understand what 500 million litres is. But for many people, I'll equate that to about 200 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So if we filled up 200 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and remember the Tokyo Olympic Games are coming up this year, if we filled up 200, that's how much sewage we receive from Melburnians down to the Western treatment plant. The actual Western treatment plant is about 10,500 hectares. So I was really conscious that many of you don't work in hectares. So I've been able to convert that to about, at the most, I think about 110 square kilometres. And that's how large the Western treatment plant is. Now, what you would normally do is, and it gives you, this is another way of moving between the different sewage processes. If you wanted to, you're only interested in sewage, you can hover over the number 1, just like on the left-hand side of the screen, and it says sewage inflow. Number 5, you can see again on the left-hand side of the actual home page, but at the same time on this map, you can see it's all about recycled water. And then this is actually the direction of the sewage. It's flowing by the time it gets to our property at the Western Treatment Plant. It's no longer flowing deep below the ground in those really large pipes, those large enclosed pipes, but it's actually come up to the surface and is flowing on the surface through the Western Treatment Plant. So this line here, it's beautiful straight, more or less straight line, is telling you this is the sewage, and it's coming down and it's flowing right down. And you can see here, I hope you can see my cursor, there are a number of ponds, and we'll be looking at those in a little while to tell you how we treat the sewage that's coming into the Western Treatment Plant. There's a couple of other small icons that I want you to be very aware of. One of them here is the Werribee Farm District. It's where a lot of vegetables are actually grown, and it's right, very, very close to the Western Treatment Plant. So it's very, very close. And why we've got that actually on this map is because the recycled water, the Class A recycled water that is that starts off as the raw sewage and then ends up, and we classify it as Class A recycled water, then goes to the Werribee Farm District, and we're also very close to the Werribee Zoo. So we've got some beautiful, really large animals that require a lot of water for their habitats. The other icons that I want you to be very clear about is this tractor here, because we actually do have an agricultural side to the Western Treatment Plant. And lastly, but not least, so we've talked about the farm side of the Western Treatment Plant. We've talked about the sewage treatment of the Western Treatment Plant, but we also have a number of decommissioned older lagoon systems or ponds that we once upon a time used for cleaning up the sewage or treating the sewage that have now been handed over and are a really important part of the Western Treatment Plant. And that's talking about biodiversity, enhancing that biodiversity that we have at the Western Treatment Plant, where we have approximately 300 species of birds can be detected at the Western Treatment Plant. And in fact, it is a significant wetland area. They are constructed wetlands, but it's a significant wetland area, and it's listed as a Ramsar site. So it's a wetland of international significance. So just let me say that there are a number of migratory birds that visit the Western Treatment Plant in our warmer months. So they come all the way from Siberia or Alaska and fly all the way down here to the Western Treatment Plant, where they are moving away from those colder temperatures and actually fattening themselves up here at the Western Treatment Plant. So we're very proud of being able to call the Western Treatment Plant a temporary home to a lot of internationally significant migratory birds. So now that I've shown you a little bit about the Western Treatment Plant, in particular, you'll see here, there's also Port Phillip Bay, where there are a number of outlets once the sewage has been treated. So that's really significant as well, because what that means is that we have many obligations, both at the state level and at the federal level. So we have obligations to meet in terms of for example, the Environment Protection Authority, and also the EPBC. It's a conservation act that we have here in Australia. So I'm going to just stop for 5 seconds because I can really build up, but it's time to ask if anybody has any questions for me. If there's no questions.
So Kim, we had one question. How
Yes.
deep is the max depth of the sewerage line?
The maximum depth of the sewer. Oh, I've heard a number of different depths of the pipes that actually bring the sewage to the Western Treatment Plant. Is that, have I understood that correctly?
We might ask if that person can just clarify their question in the chat box, and we can come back. The other question is, what technology is used in the Western Treatment Plant to treat dirty water, and do residents pay for this processing?
Yes, good questions. So, what I will do is I will actually go into in more detail how we actually clean up the sewage. And do the people who contribute to the sewage, do they pay? Yes, there is a sewage charge.
The next question is, what indicator do you use to control the quality of the outlet?
So we do have, we work very closely with a number of research groups, as well as taking samples ourselves, where we actually sample the water, so that the actual effluent is tested, both by research groups within Port Phillip Bay, but also prior to it being discharged into Port Phillip Bay. But we'll talk a little bit more about not just the discharge, but also how we can reuse or recycle that the effluent. Now, can I go back to the first question again? Because how deep the pipes are, if I understand correctly. By the time it comes to the Western Treatment Plant, it's actually travelling on the surface. But to actually get to the Western Treatment Plant from the city of Melbourne, and from those northern and western suburbs, it does travel deep below the ground. My estimate was somebody's actually said to me it's as much as 40 metres or even more than 40 metres, but you know, it can actually be deeper than that. It really depends. And let me just say that even though I said in the main it's gravity flow all the way from Melbourne, we do have a number of pumping stations that bring it up when we need it to be I guess forced a little bit further down, all the way to the Western Treatment Plant, which is actually on the coastline to help people. I hope I answered people's questions correctly. And you know, I think Aaron Zanata's on the line, and if he wants to step in at any point, then he's welcome to. But I hope I've answered everybody's questions. But I think what I'd like to do, and it sounds like what people would like to hear about, excuse me, is a little bit more of detail about how we actually treat the sewage. Is that right? I'm hoping, because you know, it's pretty exciting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, and we've got these 360-degree images, and I've just pressed number 1, and it's about the inflow. So sewage inflow. And as you can see here, there we have on the surface these channels, we call them channels. They're concrete lined, and it actually shows the flow of the sewage coming down and heading towards Port Phillip Bay. So if I turn this around a little bit, you can actually see, hopefully you can see Melbourne in the distance there. You can actually see Melbourne in the skyline there. So that just shows you how far the sewage is travelling. And it's travelling deep below the ground just before it hits the property or the Western Treatment Plant, and it comes up to the surface, and then it flows through these open channels all the way to the sewage process treatment lagoon system. There's a couple of things that I'd like to show you The icons that are yellow, there's some facts. So after the flush, I'm going to try and maybe that's better. So after the flush is one. So the yellow icons actually give you some information about the journey, for example, in this instance. And we also have some little videos as well. And the little videos are these ones. The icon or the color is blue. So blue represents videos. And this, I'm not going to play it I'm just trying to conserve time. But if you'd like to go back, you can have a look at this virtual tour and actually see a video of how we handle sewage system spills. All right, so you can actually see, as I mentioned, the agricultural side of the Western treatment plant. You can see paddocks here that have had crops on them, grown on them. And let me just say that the very initial, historically, we cleaned up sewage by flooding these paddocks with sewage. So we used the terms grass and land filtration, and we actually flooded these paddocks. And that was how we treated it. Like I said, this sewage treatment plant opened in 1897. So those the older and historical treatment methods were just simply flooding it onto these paddocks. Of course, we still maintain these paddocks, and they're very, very important as part of the management of the Western treatment plant. And so there is an agricultural side to the Western treatment plant. So what I'm going to do is let's quickly move down and follow this sewage all the way down to how we treat the sewage. What I'm going to show you is one set of lagoons or ponds. I'm going to show you 10 ponds, and I'm just going to show you, move it around a little bit so you can actually see the actual lagoon system that I'm talking about. This one here with a white cover on it is pond number 1. And then the last pond is just about there, and we'll see it a little bit closer further down when we start talking about tertiary treatment. But there are 10 ponds, and it takes about 30 days or about a month for a little droplet of sewage coming into pond number 1 and making its way all the way down to pond number 10. You probably already worked out, for many of you, you've already worked out why we have these covers. So pond number 1, it's about 200 meters wide and about 1.5 kilometers long. And so when I call them ponds, they're very large ponds in my mind. The pond number 1 is quite deep too. So at this end here, which is closest to us, it's about 6 to 8 meters in depth. And what happens is that sewage is traveling through that open concrete channel, and then it flows in underneath these covers. And then as it flows in underneath these covers, it slows down. So any of the solids within the sewage start to settle underneath those covers. Now, let me just say that I think that it's a wonderful thing that we're actually looking at a virtual tour instead of a real tour, being out there on a bus, because at the moment they're actually desludging underneath these covers. So some of these covers have been opened up, and I've been told the smell is quite strong, as you can imagine. But remember, the solids and the scum, the oils and fats, start to get caught underneath those covers. And then when the actual liquid part of the sewage, it can continue. Let me also say that pond number 1 is higher than pond number 2. So again, we've got this gradient flow between the different ponds. So what's important and why have we got this cover? What's really important about this cover initially is because Yes, it smells. It's a sewage treatment plant. And so the original covers were put on to minimize the odor. And this is something that's very important when you're, obviously most of you would know this, when you've got a sewage treatment plant, to actually keep the odor down. And part of that is under the EPA, or the Environment Protection of Authority license, that we need to minimize the odor. And one way of doing that is actually putting a cover on it. But of course, when you put a cover on it, you can keep the odor down, but you can also capture all of that wonderful gas that the microorganisms that are coming down in the sewage, that are living in these ponds, actually produce. And that wonderful odor, or the gases that are produced, can actually be captured underneath these covers. Let me just point you in the right direction, and I'll just open it up. Under this icon, it's called power plant. So the gases are captured underneath here, in particular, as you would imagine, methane. And we have two power plants. The second one was still under construction when this image was taken, and is still being commissioned, if I understand correctly. So our very first power plant is here, 10 megawatts, and there's a second one that's just being built, and that is 6 megawatts. And of course, the methane is taken from underneath those covers, sent over to the power plant, and we're able to generate electricity. So I'm going to go back to that original, just so that you know, here it is, it's very close to the lagoon system. So we've got power plant, we can produce energy. And of course, the aim is to produce enough energy to cover all of our energy needs at the Western Treatment Plant. And also, if we have excess, then of course it will be put back into the grid. So houses, any of the houses that are quite close to the Western Treatment Plant, will be able to access electricity made from this sewage treatment. Just for those of you who may not be as familiar as others, we have actually, I'm pressing here, I'm clicking on Pond 1 covers, and we have a little, and remember that this tour, that this virtual tour was really aimed, or well, one of our biggest audiences for this virtual tour was schools, both primary and secondary. So you can actually see that we've actually treated it like that too. So we've made these little cartoons to actually explain what primary treatment of sewage is. And when you have the time, if you're interested, you can actually have a look at this primary treatment and have a look at this little cartoon that we've put together. So going back to primary treatment, very important. We've talked about the capture of methane gases. And of course, Melbourne Water has a path to net zero, so that by 2030, we will have zero carbon emissions, and that is our aim. And by having the gases, those greenhouse gases such as methane, we're capturing them and reusing them. That for us is a really good system of waste to resource. So everything we're thinking about when we're looking at the Western Treatment Plant is about waste to resource. So gases, biosolids that are actually captured, that have settled underneath here. We do we are practicing different methods for using those biosolids, and that's been going on for a number of years, but we're also at this point in time looking at sending some of these biosolids to farm areas, not so in the relative area of the Western Treatment Plant. Now, before I move on a little bit more to the process, learning more about the process, or talking more about the process, is there any other questions?
We have a lot of questions coming through. We're happy to have them asked at the end if you would prefer.
Exactly. Oh, that is wonderful. I'm glad people are asking questions. I just hope I can answer them. All right, then.
It's just Aaron from the Western Treatment Plans. Sorry, Kim, to interrupt. And Natalie and I are doing our best to type really quickly to answer the ones in the chat. So we'll try and do a combination of both.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Natalie. So obviously, you know, I'm not an engineer, but Natalie is there to help out. She's great process engineer. And if there's any livability questions, and in particular about the agriculture, or for example, the actual conservation area, and as I said, this is a Ramsar site, direct them to Aaron as the head of the livability team. So I'm going to keep going because I'm aware that you know, we should be moving on, and maybe we should talk a little bit more about how we then treat the sewage. So this is pond number 5. So we've talked about pond number 1. And of course, there's a lot of activity in 2, 3, and 4, but we've decided to focus on specific ponds within the sewage treatment process, just so that it just gives the students or anybody who's looking at the virtual tour an overview of what's going on. This is pond number 5. It tends to be one of the ponds that really takes the students and gets the students' interest. And for us, that's really important. There's a point of contact that we really, really need. Now, I'm just going to move it around so you can actually see the full pond number 5. There's pond number 5 on one side, which is my left-hand side of the actual screen, and you can see that there is aerators. You can see it's very churned up, and there are surface aerators on that side of pond number 5. This side to the right is a very, very, very calm environment. And for those of you who are really familiar with sewage treatment, you would know it as the activated sludge plant. Now, this is a fairly, I guess it's a fairly old system for removing nutrients within the sewage. And so as a combination of the sewage, once it's got rid of quite a bit of its solids, the liquid part is moving down into pond number 5. And what's actually happening here is that we have microorganisms, like we had microorganisms, by the way, in pond number 1, especially underneath those covers. We have microorganisms, different types of microorganisms that are love and aerobic, lots of oxygen area on the left-hand side of this pond. And then there's microorganisms on this other side of pond number 5. It's a very calm area. It's an anoxic area. There's no free oxygen. And by actually cycling the liquid part of the sewage through these different environments, we're actually able to decrease so many of the nutrients that are actually within the sewage. And as you can imagine, when I mentioned before about the Environment Protection Authority, we have a license. We do not want to have an adverse effect on any of this once we refer to it as effluent or discharging into Port Phillip Bay. So that is a really important point. And as many of you would already know, and that's why we have the activated sludge plant. It's to actually minimise those nutrients before they go into Port Phillip Bay and into that discharge point where we're going to have an adverse effect on the actual receiving environment, which is, in this instance, Port Phillip Bay. I'm just going to quickly turn this around and I want to show you innovation because, and I'm sure Natalie could talk about this a lot better than I can. So what I'm going to show you at the top of this photo is pond number 1. And you can see it there. So it's this, what we call innovation is about a different way of minimizing or decreasing the amount of nutrients within the sewage. And this has recently been built in the last couple of years. It's I don't know if you call it an activated sludge plant, but it's definitely, we're referring it to a nutrient reduction. So these are a different way of reducing the nutrients. So it's a different system and it's much more efficient. One of the advantages of this is that, as you saw in pond number 5 that I spoke about before, if anything goes wrong in pond number 5, you have to take the whole system offline, whereas these are segmented. So you can actually close off different sections of these very large tanks. But they, in essence, I believe, do the same as the pond number 5, which is reduce the amount of nutrients before it is discharged into Port Phillip Bay. So I just thought I'd like to keep you up to date with different ways we're looking at how we treat the sewage and more up-to-date ways of treating the sewage. And it's always really important to talk about the impact on the receiving environment, whether it's odour, as we've talked about before, or nutrients going into Port Phillip Bay. I'm going to continue, if that's okay, with Paul Hui and Robbie, given that Aaron's and Natalie are actually answering all the questions. And I hope I haven't lost everybody, but tell me to go slower if I am going too fast. Now, we've talked about primary treatment in pond number 1. We've talked about secondary treatment in pond number 5. Now we're getting to the end of the 10 ponds. As I said, there are 10 ponds that we use to clean up sewage. They're massive ponds, 200 metres wide, 1.5 kilometres long, but these end ponds from about 6 to 10 are actually a lot shallower. So what I didn't mention is that in pond number 5, it's about 4 metres deep. But these ponds are not as deep. They're around the 1 to 2 metres in depth. And what's really important is that what we're doing in this very natural environment, by the way, or natural sewage treatment process, is actually letting the sun help us out here. So up until this point, up until pond number 5, we've used a lot of bacteria to help us clean up the sewage. But at this point in 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, we don't need a lot of bacteria anymore. And what we're trying to do is to actually minimize the number of bacteria, the concentration of the bacteria, and using the sun to help us out. So really large, much shallower ponds. As I said, it takes about a month for a small drop of sewage to get all the way down here. By the time we get to pond number 10, we start to refer to it, and I know many of you would refer to it as effluent, but we also refer to it as Class C recycled water. And so when the sampling is done, you would expect that in 100 mils of this pond 10 effluent, there would be about 1,000 enteric microorganisms. So that's your rough count for a Class C recycled water. So what do you do with the Class C recycled water? And again, once upon a time, we would just discharge this into Port Phillip Bay, but we have been through a major drought a number of years ago, and we saw this no longer as wastewater to be discharged once it's been cleaned up. We saw it as a resource. How can we use it better, either on the property or even off the property. So it has become a resource. And that's why you might have noticed I don't call it wastewater anymore, because, you know, it's not waste, it's a resource. And I'm hoping that I'm supporting everything that Aaron and Natalie are writing and answering your questions. So we're at the finish line, and you can see here, even in the background, and I'm going to spin it around, the last pond number 10, and that's where it says the finish line here. And you can see we're so very close to Port Phillip Bay just here. And some of that Class C recycled water will be discharged into Port Phillip Bay. Some of it will be used, and as I was talking about, agriculture on the Western Treatment Plant. So it will be used to grow crops, to irrigate crops on the Western Treatment Plant. But of course, many of you are already saying, yeah, Kim, we know what you're going to do with this Class C recycled water. You're going to make it even better than Class C recycled water. You're going to disinfect it even further. And so we're coming up to our last number here on the left-hand side. And what we're going to do is go to the recycled water. This is where we make our Class A recycled water. And as I said before, we've got all these little videos for anybody who wants to know more about and an overview of how we do things at the Western Treatment Plant here in Melbourne, how we clean up and how we recycle water. And for most of you, you might have already worked it out that we use a combination of chlorine and ultraviolet light, here at the Western Treatment Plant. So at the Western Treatment Plant, that is the methodology that we use. And how do we use this class? And we now call this, once it's been disinfected, we call it Class A recycled water. So again, using that same a methodology, if you take 100 mils of Class A recycled water and you count how many enteric bacteria within it, then you would be looking at should be able to count around 10 enteric bacteria for that 100 mils. So where are we going to use it? Well, we're using our Class C recycled water on the Western Treatment Plant, but outside the Western Treatment Plant, we're very close. And I hope you might have remembered when I showed you that map that there is an irrigation district, and the Werribee Irrigation District not so far away, and they can tap into our recycled water. And in particular, during our drought, we call it the Millennium Drought, they were able to use our recycled water to actually continue. And I would say at that point there would be very much in favour of food security when you have, because water is essential for growing vegetables. It's as simple as that. So food security is really, really important. So when you're talking about the Western Treatment Plant, we're really proud to talk about it from waste to resources, how we manage these three different activities: agriculture, sewage treatment, as well as the conservation area. And I haven't talked a lot about the conservation area because I think I'm out of time, to be honest with you. But if you would like to know a little bit more, then down the bottom, wetland and biodiversity. And like I said, it's a beautiful, beautiful area. We have people from all over the world coming to visit because of the diversity of birds that we have at the Western Treatment Plant. So look, what I'm putting out there to you, if you ever get a chance to visit Melbourne, come and visit us at the Western Treatment Plant. And on that note, I think I'm finished. Is that okay with everybody? I'm going to stop sharing. I can see Hui's face. He's still smiling. So I hope that it came across well.
Kim, it's, excuse me, it's Greg here. So yes, from my perspective, I could hear you loud and clear. I think everybody asked lots of questions. And while you've been talking, as you know, Aaron and Nat have been answering questions along the way. So that's been fantastic. We might hand back shortly to Paul or Robbie, but just from my perspective, I'd just like to thank yourself and Aaron and Nat for going through the tour and just responding to questions as they've come along. And I'm sure if there's further questions in the chat, we'll just keep continuing to do that. So thank you very much.
So I was wondering, Greg, if anybody's brave enough to actually ask us a question. It's okay to put it in the chat, but if anybody wants to have a little bit of a, you know, a talk with us and ask us questions, we're happy for people to ask us questions as well. And I will refer to Nat with all the answers.
So on that point, hand over to Paul and just see what you want to do next, Paul.
Well, I'd like to take up Kim's offer for Q&As, and I encourage everyone, perhaps raise your hand and unmute your screen and ask your question of Kim. Whilst we're waiting for some of our delegates to prepare their questions, can any of the Melbourne Water staff recap some of the responses to the questions asked in the chat box? I saw a range of written questions and very good responses from the Melbourne Water engineers. So if you could please recap them. But before that, look, I appreciate there's many online today. We have nearly 200 dial-ins with, as I can see from Da Nang, many in the room. So we may have well over 300-400 people, and we won't get the chance to answer everyone's question from today. So Robbie, at the end of today's presentation, will share some emails. Those that don't get to ask questions or have additional information requests, please get in touch with Robbie and myself, and we will ensure your questions and information requests are passed to the right people at Melbourne Water. So, does anyone have a question of the team from Melbourne Water?
So I'd like to say that take the opportunity, because we've got a process engineer in the room. So I would say I'm going to have to move, because I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm going to move because my battery's running down. I'm still here, but I'm walking. Sorry, guys.
No problem, Kim.
It's Aaron from Melbourne Water. Is any of the written questions that are down, have we got most of those, or have we missed any? Nat is a much faster typer than I am, so thank you.
Aaron, I think you did capture most of the question very well. I had an additional question to kick off with, Aaron. How much electricity do you produce from your methane gas system? And if you could put that in the context of how much electricity Melbourne Water uses, do you make anywhere near enough electricity to meet your needs?
Yes, and can I ask that, can Nat be unmuted as well? I think she's still Natalie Christie on the nest. We are self-sufficient in what we use on site. I haven't got the technical details to how much we generate from compared to the rest of Melbourne, but we are very energy hungry with our pumps because we have to lift, turn, spin, a whole lot of things. But with we're just building another gas power plant at the moment, and that coming online will make us be able to export.
Wow, that's incredibly impressive, Aaron. So just to recap, Melbourne Water actually generate more electricity from the waste that they generate than they actually need. And now they're able to sell electricity back to the energy company, which they can use to increase their revenue.
Absolutely. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure if Aaron was going to answer that one. So that's when I showed the two power plants that are the second one being built. So the capacity, the second one, the capacity is about 6 megawatts. Am I right there, Natalie?
Yes, sorry, I was struggling to get myself unmuted. Yeah, so we treat, as Aaron said before, we treat, we converted most of the biogas captured for reuse on site. And whenever we have surplus power that is generated, we export back to the grid.
We
see
have
it. Sorry.
We have a gentleman with his hand up from Indonesia. Please ask your question. Robbie,
You need to unmute yourself. Please go ahead. We'll take the next question from Shona.
The presentation, and great to see this initiative from AWP and AWA. My name's Shona. I'm working with the World Bank, and just wanted to, you've given us a really good overview of the treatment processes and some of the reuse initiatives, innovation. I wonder if maybe you could touch on a little bit about operation and maintenance. That's often a big challenge in developing countries in particular. So maybe just some information around how many operators you have, maybe some of the practices or challenges around operating and maintaining such a big treatment plant. Thank you.
I'll take that one. So although Western Treatment Plant is a large plant, most of our treatment is lagoon based, and this is a very low maintenance type of treatment. All the water that comes into the plant flows out to the bay by gravity. It just goes through the lagoons without any excessive energy requirement, which means that most of our operations and maintenance are focused on the activated sludge plants, which Kim has mentioned earlier. We've got 3 activated sludge plants on site. And the maintenance that we do on these vary from plant to plant because they are not all similar in terms of how they are run. So we've got, for example, one activated sludge plant with aerators, whereas the other 2 activated sludge plants use blowers instead of aerators. So the maintenance that we do on these plants vary based on their requirement.
I think I'll just add to that we have a team of 8 operators that work business hours and then on weekends. But during the night, our SCADA system sends alarms that go to a centralized control room. And then depending on the level of the alarm then that person will be woken up in the middle of the night and they will assess that alarm. They can log on remotely from our SCADA system and adjust the plant as required. But on more challenging events, they may have to come to site and adjust and respond. We outsource our maintenance to a company called Wood, and they provide our maintenance and low risk capital activities across the sewerage and water network of Melbourne.
Next question is from Luke.
Hi everyone, my name is Dirk. I'm from Deakin University and just recently started working with INZPP. And I have a question about biosolid. So how much biosolid they have been generating from the wastewater treatment plant over the years and like average every year? Thank you. And thank you, Kim, so much for the very interesting presentation. I learned a lot from the presentation. I based in Geelong. I have been drive across Werribee many times, but I don't know that we have a beautiful wastewater treatment plant there. Thanks, Kim.
In terms of biosolids, our production vary from year to year. And it all depends on how fast the solids can dry. So it depends a lot on the weather as well. Typically, we are aiming for about 35 to 40,000 dry tons a year.
I think there was a question on odour early on, and the majority of the time we've got our Environmental Protection Agency at the Western Treatment Plant. We have a license with conditions. One of those is no offensive odours leaving the boundary. During normal years with our odour control facility, we can manage that quite well. But at the moment, we've, from a capital project, we've removed a segment of the cover and we're taking the scum away. That's creating a whole range of huge challenges for us from an EPA license perspective, as well as impacting our community with pretty offensive odours. So that is a current challenge that we're using, and we've tried a number of different methodologies to try and get it from spraying it with lime to putting I don't know what we call it, Nat, when we're spraying along the fence line there.
Sorry, I can't remember on top of my head.
So sorry, I'll get back to you on that. But yeah, odour is a real challenge at the moment when we take our covers off and we're venting, and plus we're stirring it and trying to dry the scum product, which is effectively fats, hair, and really dried solid biosolids.
Aaron, we have a question that we don't think was picked up in the response. Do you have a problem of too much nitrogen or too much phosphorus, in other words, eutrophication and algal blooms from time to time in the ponds, especially in the last pond step? If yes, what are you doing to deal with that problem?
Very good question and very topical at the moment. Nat, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So with the with phosphorus, it is currently not classified as a limiting nutrient at Port Phillip Bay, so we don't focus too much on phosphorus. At Western Treatment Plant, we usually just make sure that we release nitrogen that is that complies to the EPA license that we have. With regards to, sorry, my screen keeps on blinking, and okay, and with regards to algae blooms, we do have them every summer with blue-green algae. It is currently one of the issues that we have with our Class A recycled water supply. Whenever we have algae bloom, we have to notify the customers and do some sort of toxicity test to make sure that it is not toxic when the recycled water goes to the end users. In terms of what we are doing, we are currently monitoring our treatment plant to make sure that there's no excessive nutrients that are released from our treatment plant at any stage of the process that would encourage the algae to bloom.
Okay, we have a question from Mr. Bansavam. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So we are the team here, 3 persons from Laos, the Department of Water Supply. So thank you for very nice presentation, and we also have many things to learn from the waste treatment from the south of Australia. So the question is really interesting about the O&M, but I think some participants here mentioned already. So we would like to know, because the pond, 10 pond and very big pond, so we interesting about how to operation and maintenance. So the revenue can cover the O&M or something. The salary or O&M, I have I see you have like a power plant also. That means the power plant can have the revenue cover the O&M, something like that. And second thing, we would like to know the outlets, the water quality in the outlet can meet the standard because constructed wetland. And third thing, how to manage the smell. I think we have some smell there, but big plan how to manage the smell. So that's from Lao team. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll so the first question is about O&M on the lagoons. So with the lagoons, we don't do a lot of work on it because it's very low maintenance. What we do is just to make sure that the water still flows in and flows out. We do have some civil structure inspection on the lagoons to make sure that it's still performing well in terms of the civil structure, but in terms of operations, there's not a lot that we do.
Can I just jump in there, Nat? Just the one thing that I think might help. We have all our assets in a system called Maximo. So each individual asset is listed in there and it's graded on its criticality. If we were to do work, so after Nat indicated, if we've done an inspection on one of our civil assets, then that asset, say if we've got a vermin are trying to attack it, like a rabbit or something like that, we'd then issue a service request, which then will be assessed by our engineers, and they will determine if a work order is required. That work order would be issued to our maintenance teams in wood, and they're broken down into electrical, mechanical, or civil. So each side is broken up, but it's all managed within our Maximo system. Sorry, Nat.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And the question about the smell. So as Aaron mentioned before, we have an odor control facility at the plant that makes sure that whatever comes in the plant through the sewage channel, all the odorous gas is removed. And further down the treatment train, we also have a big pond with aerators just after the covers to make sure that all the residual odorous gas is removed. And smell is only becoming a problem to us when the covers are taken off, like what Aaron mentioned earlier. And this is something that we are actively mitigating through community engagement and also the sprays that we install on the boundary of the plant. I know you had another question, but I can't remember what it is. If you could repeat the question again.
I think, Nat, it was about the product quality. So we've got a HACCP system, which is hazard analysis critical control points. We also have, with Department of Health and Human Services, our, I guess, controls and agreements on what the quality outcomes and how we demonstrate that quality. And then we've also got different, I guess, measuring techniques that measure the product as it's going through the system so that we can demonstrate and are auditable so people can check that we are doing the right thing. If you've got any more on that, Nat.
I would probably add that we also have a license with the Environmental Protection Authority, and I guess with the lagoons, the performance is less consistent. So during the summer, we get very good treatment because of the hot weather. During winter, we get very cold weather, and the treatment is not as good. However, our license is for the entire year, and we treat most of our waste through the activated sludge plants with a very consistent performance. So we are, I guess, balancing the tool and making sure that we comply with our license.
Okay, thank you.
I think maybe one follow-up question then about the biosolids. What is your plan for beneficial reuse in terms of how you use the biosolids for maximum uptake as part of the circular economy?
Yes, we're definitely applying to land. Sorry, Nat. Composting, and then we've also covered landfill sites with it. Sorry, Nat, for cutting you off.
No, it's all right. I was just about to say that we have a team in our integrated planning division that looks after opportunities in that area. So like Aaron said, we are currently reusing some of them, but we're still looking for opportunities in the future for other types of reuse.
I think some of those examples, which I'm not technically across, but you know, the nutrients, energy, and biosolids can be recovered with, you know, up-to-date technology, and that can be heating them to release the gas. There can be combustive electricity, while the remaining ash can be used for soil improvement or urban amenity. But don't ask me any questions on that because I've got no more.
Yeah, I think we're finished with questions then, Paul.
Can I offer anyone final chance to ask a question? Okay, well, I will now like to draw the virtual reality tour to a close. I will ask once more for everyone to share their contact details. It's important that you provide us your email address and name, either in the chat group, or please respond to the emails on screen now, either myself, Paul Smith, psmith@AWA, Robbie, or Hui. Please provide any questions you have to those three emails. We will field those questions to the most appropriate staff at Melbourne Water. And we will also provide you a survey which seeks your responses to your experiences in today's tour. It's very important that you complete that survey and provide your honest feedback, because that will help design the future virtual reality tours that we provide for you and many other water operators from across Asia and the Pacific. We will issue those surveys straight away, as we're now looking to design a broader program of VR tours to meet your needs. So in conclusion, I wish to offer a very warm thank you to the team from Melbourne Water for your tour today, and look forward to working with you and the staff at Melbourne Water in developing future VR tours. I'd like to thank all of our delegates online today from Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, and from many other parts of the Indo-Pacific. It's great to see your interest, and we hope that you did get value from today's tour. We did hear about a very complex treatment process in a very simple term. So please reach out if you have any further information. So on that note, and unless anyone else has any final questions,
I'm just going to pass to Kim, who's got one final thing to say.
Kim.
Do I really have one final thing to say?
So, Kim, I think this was related to the QR code, whether you wanted to...
Oh, I forgot all about it. Oh, thank you so much.
So while Kim is looking for that, so just further to Paul's comment, obviously about responding to AWA, the other thing we have here, if you're able to use your phone, there is a QR code that allows you to take you straight to the tour. So that's a quick and easy way if you want to use your phone up to the screen. Hopefully that works. That will prompt your phone to download the virtual reality tour.
Thanks, Greg. And I strongly encourage everyone to use the QR code, which will take you straight to the tour. There is so much more that you didn't see today that you could see by undertaking the tour in your own right. And that includes, for example, you're able to look inside the highly advanced wastewater recycling plant, or look inside the biogas methane energy generation facility. So please do download the QR code, or if you wish, you can jump onto Melbourne Water's webpage and look for their virtual reality tours, which you can access from there as well. So on that note, I'll give everyone one last chance to include their contact details in the chat group, or please send Robbie, Hui, or myself your email address, and we will be in touch with you very shortly with any responses to questions and the survey. So in concluding, thank you all again for joining today's tour. I hope to see you all again in future tours, and thank you again to the team from Melbourne Water.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll stop sharing and say goodbye to everybody. Thank you. And thanks for the reminder, Robbie.